looking at the Beatitudes. And tonight, I simply want to read to you this one. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. We've all heard the stories. As a child, I was forced to listen to them. You know the stories about how tough they had it. We tell those stories. When I was a kid, I had to walk to school 7 miles in the snow, uphill, carrying my sister and her books. We've heard the stories. And the older my older siblings got, my sister Marjean, it's her husband that passed away, Roger. She's 17 years older than me, which puts her somewhere in her 60s or 70s. Ish, yeah. And she would talk about growing up, how when they wanted to take a bath, they had to boil the water and then put it in this tub. And all the girls had to use the same water. But the truth is, they might have been exaggerated a little. Today we hear these words, hunger and thirst. Now, a lot of times my kids, you know that question that drives you nuts as a parent, is as soon as your kids come home or as soon as you pick them up for school, the first words out of their mouth, "What's for dinner?" "I'm so hungry." I don't know. I'm just going to take a stab at this, but I'm going to guess nobody in this room has been really that hungry. But we have to remember the setting in which this was written. Because unlike my older sisters, their lives were in fact miserable. Food was hard to come by. And water. One of my favorite biblical texts, the one from John, where he talks about the woman at the well in Samaria. The women who went to get the water had to wait until the hottest part of the day. Because early in the morning, all of the people who had animals would go to the well and give their animals water. And it was only after all of them left that the women were allowed to go get their water. And the well oftentimes would be miles out of town. And if they were an average family, they had maybe one jar. And they would have to take that jar with them, fill it with water, and then bring the jar back. You were involved in digging some wells to try to make it easier. But it was a brutal, a miserable, harsh life, where they were in fact hungry, and they were in fact thirsty. And it's into this environment that Jesus speaks these words, because these people would know what that means. Only Jesus says, don't hunger and thirst after food and water, but hunger and thirst. In other words, desire it with every fiber of my being. Righteousness. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Now that's a tough word. But it's also a word that they would have known extremely well. Righteousness in Jesus' time was something literally that you wore. It was all external. It's like perfume. It's not a part of you, and yet when you walk into the room, you want others to smell it. The religious people in Jesus' time wanted you to see just how righteous they were. And perhaps if you had as great a confirmation pastor as your kids have today, right? Righteousness literally means right with. But here's the caveat. It's not ours. It's God's. If I borrow you a book, you can read it, but you don't own it. So it is with God's righteousness. God has declared us right with God, not because of what we do, not the outward sort of appearances that we want to give, not because we are the biggest giver to the church or the one who attends all of the time or the one who bows down lower than anyone else. God made us right with God in the work of Christ. And it is that acknowledgement, that awareness, that God did for us what we could not, would not do for ourselves. God made us right with God in Christ. And so while I stand in the right relationship with God because of the work of Christ, I cannot claim it. I cannot boast about it. Because it's God's righteousness. When God is out in the desert with Abram, and he says to Abram, you go to a land that I will show you, a land flowing with milk and honey. And Abraham said, I will go. God reckoned to Abraham righteous. Because Abraham was willing to believe God, to trust God. There's an old line in the theological world. The world doesn't suffer from sickness. It suffers from sin. And not sin as act, not some behavior, but sin as condition. The awareness, the acknowledgement that we do not love God with our whole hearts. We do not love our neighbor as ourselves. We are in bondage. And so only God in Christ could do for us in the act of Christ's life, death, and resurrection to free us from that condition. and to declare us righteous. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Now it's here that the image that Jesus uses should hit home with you. Now I was over to see Mikey. You know, little Mikey? You know, little Mikey? Because Mikey don't come here yet. And he had a cow that he was feeding some special concoction, because I think Maddie was going to take it to show it, and so he was going to hoop it up a little, you know, fill it out. And he told me what was in it, but I don't remember. But he said, yeah, eat that, and it'll pop out. That is exactly the word that's used here. The word in the Greek is actually the word for fattening your animals. We shall be filled. Filled to overflowing. But not a sense of stomach full, but as in spiritually full. We will understand in a way we have never understood before of God's filling us with His goodness, His love. And He fills us so that we have some to give away. We have some to give. That's what this word literally means. To fatten an animal so that it has something to give. Because it does us no good if we can't give it. The world needs that. We need that. Giving. And so I talked about the spiritual disciplines. Prayer, meditation, worship. We get to the point in this filling that we can't wait. That's why I used the 122nd Psalm, that very first line. That incredible joy, that desire to want to be together with others and with God. So blessed are those who hunger and thirst for the righteousness that God has so generously filled us with, so that we may share that with God's Word. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, as you so abundantly fill us with your goodness, so in this moment allow us to fill others around us with that goodness, with the love and the kindness, the peace. Allow us to have that desire, that deep desire to want to gather, to celebrate, to sing, to pray, to heal. Guide us this night. Strengthen us in our Lenten journey. All for the sake of your Son, Jesus Christ.